What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Mets Weekly Podcast as we are live at this very moment on YouTube and on X to discuss this week's Mets versus Yankees Subway Series, as well as all the other news and rumors over the past few days. And also, we got to talk about the trade deadline, which, of course, is a huge topic coming up in this next week. But before we do that, we must do our usual house cleaning. I want to remind everybody to hit the subscribe button if they have not already to the Mets YouTube channel, Mets Weekly YouTube channel. For this very podcast, which is now recorded live on Sundays and on Thursdays following every single series of games. For those of you who are watching on playback in the future and you want to join the conversation, make sure to turn on those post notifications to know when we go live. For those of you in the live chat as of right now, I want to let you know that we love reading your comments, your questions, your concerns, and if you feel like you are being ignored, you're not being ignored. You are just being starred throughout the show, and we'll try to pull up as many as we can to keep the flow of the conversation going. Also, remember to follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok, which mainly features Frank's instant reactions after every single Mets game. He's not here today, but it is titled The Mets Frankly Post Game. For our audio listeners, make sure to follow us on any of your favorite listening platforms to not miss the audio version of new episodes that go up at 9 a.m. the following day after these are recorded. So without further ado, let's get to episode number 68. Andrew, welcome back. It's been a while. You haven't been on the panel, but how do you feel? Where have you been? You lazy bastard. I hate you. What's up?
I mean, when you ass pound the Yankees, I think I have to come out of my hole. We got to flirt a little bit. And again, this is our World Series, remember, guys. So, we have to get our parade going. I know the Braves are coming in, and that's a way more important series. But, since, half of New York thinks this is our World Series, we got to celebrate. I would pop some bottles right now. We might need to get our ring size fixed up because, we got our World Series. And again, burying the Yankees as much as possible is always fun. But again, like I said, a way more bigger series is coming up, which we'll get to next week. But right now, just to see some heroes that we would think would be dead 2 months ago, and then continuing to murder the American League Cy Young Award winner. So keeping the trend of the New York Mets pounding good pitching. Pretty good to see.
Yeah, I mean, this, of course, the Subway Series will always be exciting. There's always going to be a lot of hype behind it. There always seems to be quite the crossroads in the season when these two teams play, of what direction they're going in. And, of course, we're right near that trade deadline, so the Mets are going one way and the Yankees are probably going another. Right now, the Yankees are really struggling, continue to struggle. Obviously, you've seen what their problems were on the field, but this isn't a Yankees podcast, so who gives a shit? The Mets, on the other hand, I mean, yet another fantastic series, more great baseball being played, and I believe that they outscored the Yankees. What was it, like 45 to 14 or something?
I think it was like
100,
like 147 to 12 or some shit like that. Again, a lot to a little. Let's just call it a lot.
I don't think that's correct, but they blew them out for 3 of these 4 games. So for them to just basically take them out with authority, very, very impressive. Let's just say that. And of course, like you said, we have a huge series coming up against the Braves. We have a huge trade deadline coming up right after that. We're going to cover all of that. But for this entire series, main takeaway, I can say I wasn't really celebrating that much because I knew what was at stake with the Braves now that they are facing, which who are in a very vulnerable place. Let's just say that. They have had a lot of injuries. Ronald Acuna went down once again. Ozzie Albies is going to be out for a while. Spencer Strider has been out all year. Matt Olson has not been the same. Austin Riley has not been the same. They've had tons of injuries. It's just not going their way for the Braves. And, you really feel for them. But other than that, this is their silver platter chance to pass the Braves. And let's just say that, if they do, let's just say that if they do, let's say take 3 out of 4. If they do win all 4, maybe you're talking about a completely different deadline as opposed to maybe soft buy and soft sell or soft buy or filling in the margins. Maybe they go after something even bigger because you pass the Braves. Braves are a team that we didn't expect the Mets to beat at all this year. And now we're in a different situation. So what do you think about that? Do you think that that has, kind of a pivoting point where you beat the Braves, they put them in a different position for the trade deadline? What do you think?
I mean, obviously, if you sweep them, I mean, you're jumping them, and again, like, we'll see what happens with the Cardinals. But again, if you sweep them, you end up as the first wild card in the National League. Like this going from the conglomerate that was, well, we're in the race because the National League was mediocre, to now leading that race. If again, obviously, everything goes well this weekend, you know, you kind of have to. And David Stearns has said, and I have still kind of feared that Stearns is going to be like, you know what, this isn't the year. But how many chances do you got? And I was gonna bring this up. Look at the National League. There's only one team anyone fears, and that being the Philadelphia Phillies. We know the Dodgers postseason track record. They're going to be great in the regular season. Nobody fears them come postseason time. You're never going to get the Braves as weak as they are right now. Nobody cares about any of the NL Central teams. They're all mediocre. So the NL is wide open. The only team you have to get through is the Phillies, which historically the last couple of years, the Mets have played well. So you're
Yeah.
sitting in a spot where again, Alonso's not. It's similar kind of to the other teams. You're not guaranteed Alonso here next year. You're not guaranteed Severino, JD Martinez. Yes, this isn't the core to push all the chips in. I'm not saying dump, go full AJ Preller and trade everyone for, Robert and Crochet. Even though I don't think those guys are worth it, but that's a different discussion for later in the stream.
Yeah.
But there are guys to improve this again. If it's two high leverage and like actual high leverage relievers, maybe that changes the adjustment for Stearns being like, let me go get two more maybe Phil Maton types. Maybe they do go get in that bigger market. Obviously, Mason Miller wasn't been an option. I know he just got injured, but maybe as much as I don't like it, maybe they're more aggressive in a guy like a Tanner Scott. Maybe they go call back Tampa Bay and get the better version of those arms, those high leverage arms. Maybe they go to Texas and get a high level starting pitcher that they could potentially move, which again, we'll get to some names later in the stream. Okay. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I look at it from, the perspective, and Brad coming in with a really good point here, obviously saying that this cannot be the 2022 trade deadline. And I understand that. But from the viewpoint of 2024, I personally don't think they're in the same situation as 2022. There was a lot of glaring holes on that 2022 team, main more having to do with Billy Epler, who kind of just built a really top-heavy roster. Again, we don't need to go over that. Some people still defend that guy. I don't know how you do. But how they kind of formed that roster, they needed a big bat. They needed another starting pitcher. They needed to add bullpen help. They needed a lot of different things. The Mets kind of just need marginal improvement right now. And if they do end up presented with a big star or with a big piece, then there's a strong possibility that maybe they do dip their toe into that. Maybe there is like a high profile piece that they do go after, or a high upside piece that they do after. And we'll go over some of those possibilities. But I think when you look at it as a whole, the Mets are definitely a lot deeper of a team as compared to 2022. And it's weird to think about because that team won 101 games, but it was very flawed. And we talked about it throughout the entire 2022 season. Anybody that watched that New York Mets team in 2022, no matter how good they seemed to be, anybody that saw them, they saw major issues. But considering that they had since the win-loss record that was so good, no one seemed to care. And that's kind of what faltered them at the end. That's how they fell short. So right now in 2024, it's a little bit different of a situation because it's a lot deeper. 1 through 9 is contributing. You have a few guys who are struggling, but, one of the guys who are struggling picked up these last few games. You have marginal issues with this team right now. You have things that can really be fixed with one deadline. for it to be a competitive team in October. It's not the flashiest names. It's not the max star power that the Yankees have. But what did that get the Yankees? Swept by the Mets in 4 games. So, and like we won our World Series with this team. It's incredible, isn't it? And yes, this is obvious. No Darren Ruffs or Daniel Vogelbachs, obviously. I don't think Stearns is going to go that direction because I think Stearns likes actual tools. We saw how hesitant he was to bring in a JD Martinez who is just a bat. So, when you look at it, I think that when he does bring in these pieces, they're definitely not going to be just bats. They're not going to be platoon bats. They're going to be guys who can provide tools on so many different sides of the field. Anything else you want to add, Andrew? Then we'll get into this series.
I mean, if you look at the guys who are available, and I know this is going to sound bad, that
Yeah.
there are players this deadline especially who are probably closer to the quality of the prospecting of acquiring a guy like Daniel Vogelbach and Darren Ruff than those superstars because there is no superstars available.
Yeah.
I like Luis Robert.
It's more of an off-season thing to me right now to get these superstars. Yeah.
And it's not even the point. Like everyone, again, we and baseball fans have kind of been rewarded with guys like Soto getting moved mid-season. Like there's none of those guys available. And the fact that the White Sox are taking, and I like Luis Robert. I think Luis Robert is a very good player. He is not worth, and if they are looking for a Soto type package, he's not worth that. I think he's a very good player. I would take him on my team any day of the week. But that type of guy who has never been able to stay healthy, who's had only one really good season, and that being in 2020, and you're, from the Mets perspective, probably blowing out Jet, Gilbert, Acuna, maybe 2 of the 3, plus maybe a Sproat, plus maybe a Tidwell, maybe even a Christian Scott, maybe the injury, but that's the type of prospect capital you're giving up for a non-superstar. Again, I'm not saying I wouldn't take Luis Robert I would take Luis Robert in center field any day of the week. But this deadline, there is no superstar where even Garrett Crochet, I don't think he's worth it. I think he's a very good pitcher. I think if the guy in Detroit, Mr. Scooby Dooby, that's a different conversation. And that's really a one-team conversation in Baltimore if that was to happen, because they're the only team that can give that package. So, and especially with them there not being a lot of sellers, you have your bottom feeders, but then you have the guys now kind of flirting of what side they're going to be. It's going to be a seller's market. So they are taking advantage of, okay, yeah, there's no superstars available, but there's really not a lot of great free agents out there. Most of the big free agents this year are on good teams who, again, we'll see what happens in the offseason. They're not going to get traded. The Mets now are good, so Alonso would have been off that market. You look at, obviously, Santander and Burns in Baltimore, so you don't have that superstar or really good all-star type player. And Luis Robert and Crochet are all-stars, but they're not worth that superstar price that the White Sox are putting on them. So if somebody like the Dodgers have the ability, they have that prospect capital, and they want to go nuts and kind of overpay for good players at a great player price, especially how this market is, don't be surprised. I just don't think the Mets should be in that, market where there's a lot of guys that we'll get to later in the stream that are good players. Price to acquire isn't going to be astronomical. Yes, maybe it's a piece that you might not want to give up for a couple guys. But again, the fact that the Mets have built their farm system up the last couple of years, they have some excess goods to maybe you can trade this guy and not feel as bad because, one, it was a good draft that starts to sign most of his guys. Obviously, you had a couple of the guys at last year's deadline who have come into the system and have played relatively pretty well. And again, you have continuous international signings that Stearns is going to be able to continue to build. So I think the Mets right now are in a good spot. And I think if they do sweep the Braves this weekend, I think that does change their perspective. And maybe, we always make on this channel the bundle trades. Maybe there is a big bundle for 2 really good pieces that maybe nobody sees coming. Could be in Stearns' kind of back pocket if, we go on a run and win the next 7 going into the break, or 6 out of 7.
Yeah, I mean, my trust in Stearns, obviously, is pretty high. as to where he knows how to fill in some of these pieces of contenders, but he also has a little bit more flexibility now as compared to what he had in Milwaukee. So, now it opens the door for a little bit better things as to what they can do in this trade deadline. So we'll see what happens. And we're going to get into the trade deadline wish lists of what we would prefer them to do later on in the show. But let's actually talk about this series, which of course was pretty exciting because, again, the Subway Series always has a lot of pent up excitement behind it. And lots of the excitement was really, really just coming from the Mets side. Finishing off the 4-game sweep in the Bronx, basically just emptying the stadium last night, which was incredible. But taking a look at this series rundown, the first game was a bit of a nail biter towards the beginning. Jose Quintana went 5 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned run, walked 5, got his pitch count pretty high earlier on in the game, and the Mets did really struggle offensively in this game. They left the bases loaded twice, but you did have a home run from McNeil, which was the difference maker. Lindor homered, and Alonso 2 hits, hit from Vientos, hit from Torrens, hit from Taylor, but they were really struggling with runners in scoring position. Other than Ottavino making it a little bit closer of a game, making it 3-2, the bullpen was great, and the Mets got a 3-2 victory to take the first 3 games of the Subway Series this season. And then the second game came along. It was an absolute bloodbath. The Mets just continue to destroy Garrett Cole throughout his entire career. He now has a 6.99 earned run average in his career against the Mets, which is the worst against any team for Garrett Cole. Shabaniah did not go deep into this game, couldn't get out of the 5th inning. 4 walks, 4 strikeouts, 2-run ball. Had a few good innings, had a few tough innings, but Ottavino did bail him out in that 5th inning with the bases loaded. Fingers crossed, and we got our wish. That's good. 2 home run game from Francisco Lindor, 3 hits from him. Home run from Alonso breaking that homerless drought. Home run from Vientos. Home run from Taylor that tied the game early on in the game. 2 hits from J.D. Martinez. More hits from Jeff McNeil as he continues to stay hot. And the Mets won 12-3 to take all 4 games against the New York Yankees this year. And the one thing that I will say off the top of my head from what we have seen from these 4 games, all 4 games, all 4 victories against the Yankees, against a offense that is ranked pretty high in the majors only because of 2 hitters, but still a very good team. They're still one of the best teams in baseball. Not recently. But one thing I can say is that none of our starting pitchers in these 4 games pitched through a single pitch in the 6th inning. And, of course, that has been kind of the usual this year with the Mets pitching, where they haven't been able to get length from their starting rotation. We'll talk about that a little bit later with the Christian Scott news that dropped this week. But when you look at it, it's crazy to think because you have back-to-back days. Your starting pitchers don't go deep, and you think your bullpen is taxed, but they've been able to bear well in these tight situations against the Yankees. Obviously, it's a 4-game sample. The season matters a lot more than our World Series, as they can say. But yet again, another great series, 2 sets of games. Of course, we want to get into more of the trade deadline stuff in this stream, but main takeaways from this series, and then we'll go right to studs and duds because I feel like that's the best way to recap that. What do you think, Andrew? What do you think from this series? What'd you like? What'd you dislike?
Yeah, I mean, Jeff McNeil continuing this homer power stretch out of the break. Who the hell saw that coming at all? Going from being, obviously the worst and least productive player in the lineup. Hey, you're getting some sort of pulse. Ain't that a beautiful thing to see in some people's cases? And like you said, both times in both games, you needed 4 innings out of this Met bullpen. Adam Ottavino was not good in game 1. Obviously, got a big out in game 2. The Youngs, Alex Young was pretty solid in game 1. Danny Young got in and out of a jam in game 2. Obviously, we got to talk about Jake Diekman. I mean, how in the hell did he
Ballsy.
strike out Aaron Judge? And you have Yankee fans and you have people saying like, hey, maybe the Mets lulled Judge to sleep, walking him every single time, and then just missing a fastball right down the middle, like we was just expecting
Yeah.
him to be again. Like most times, if you're facing Yankees, I'm not letting Judge or Soto see a strike. You can just both have 1,000 on base percentage. You each can have 4 walks. You never see a pitch. If I'm managing, but again, we don't. Managers don't want to just put 2 guys on every inning that they come up. But again, Quintana was all right. He gave the leadoff homer to Glaber, but again, wasn't anything spectacular. It was solid. Again, 5 walks isn't the greatest, but again, you have to count that Judge had like 3 of them, so 2 or 3 of them. Plus, you had
Yeah.
Soto. So again, he was solid. Again, it's a normal Quintana type start. Kept you in the game. Gave you 5 innings. Again, Daniel Nunez continues to be just an absolute bright spot. That again, they found
Godsend.
God sent a David Stearns just come out of nowhere. This dude didn't get a big league invite spring training, and is now probably our best high leverage arm, not named Edwin Diaz, and having great stuff. Phil Maton was solid. Again, has another pretty solid outing. Again, he's not special, but again, he's a major league caliber reliever, and like yes, I think the Mets need to continue to address that kind of bridge in the lower, especially with the Mets starting rotation not going deep into games. You need guys that you can feel confident in the sixth and the seventh, and Maton. Again, he gave it the home run against the Rockies, but relatively in his Mets outings has been pretty solid. And then again, offensively, Lindor has another double and an RBI. JD with the 0 for Nimmo did not look good this series. Again, he was
Yeah.
like the only guy in yesterday's game not to get a hit. Again, that strikeout issue, which we saw before he got raging hot, is kind of peaking back up. But I'm still not, doubting Brandon Nimmo being a productive player. Again, I'd rather have this version of Nimmo who's, striking out more, trying to hit for more power than, kind of just going up there looking for a walk, unlike a Dominican right fielder for the Yankees. I'm kidding. Please come here next year. Besides the point. But again, seeing McNeil be productive, Luis Torrens had a pretty good game as well. Again, continue when he's getting opportunities, being a quality backup catcher. Bader just being stupid on the base pass, not great.
Yeah.
But again, just overall, again, game one was again the game to talk about because it was just an absolute pounding yesterday of like, oh, Lindor homering, hitting 2 homers again on both sides of the plate, continuing his ownership of the New York Yankees. Pete Alonso getting a cookie and actually hitting it hard and over the fence, unlike just hitting it through the hole for a couple of singles. It's good to see again. Please get hot. Again, I've made it clear I would have traded him last year. We all know I'm not the biggest fan of Pete Alonso, but I know I need him to get going if I want this team to have a legit chance, to get to the playoffs and then see what happens in that round robin. But if he can get going, obviously Lindor has been, an MVP candidate and he's going to get in that conversation for a National League MVP. I still don't keep unless he goes on an absolute tear the next 2 months. But getting into that top 5 to top 3 discussion, Nimmo gets back. JD Martinez looked better, had a couple hits in yesterday's game. So again, you're seeing in the Yankee and ESPN brought it up because especially with the Yankees' inability only having 2 productive guys, Tyrone Taylor having a big game against Garrett Cole, homering again in both games that he's faced Garrett Cole, being productive, having multiple hits. Again, it's the depth of this lineup. And that's why even if they are to add a guy at the deadline, I imagine if they add another quality power hitting left-handed outfielder that could hit between Mark Vientos and then Francisco Alvarez, like this again has been one of the best offenses in baseball. Imagine just getting that little tweak because again, we don't know what we're getting from Starling Marte, who was productive when he was on the field this year. It can just take this lineup even better and lengthening this lineup even more. And then the pitching again, we're getting outs. And is that more of the case? The Yankees can hit with runners in scoring position, and that offense is just that god awful that the Youngs look good. Adam Ottavino and Jake Diekman were productive in a series. You can have that conversation. We'll see what they do against the Braves. But again, you're seeing it's a 26-man team orientated win. Every guy is picking each other up. And this is what good teams do. When you don't have that superstar talent, you need a roster to win and you're seeing it from the Mets. You're getting unlikely heroes and guys that we would want to dead 2 weeks ago. Kind of an Adonis Medina save is kind of like what seems people, correlating to the Diekman save against the Yankees on game one. You need guys to step up, and you're seeing it in the lineup. Now maybe you're finally seeing it in the bullpen and obviously in the rotation all year. A rotation that I thought was going to be god awful has been, above average. When a lot of people, including myself, saw nothing, especially with the Senga injury. Again, we're going to see him back in this rotation, and obviously we lost one we'll get to later. But overall, team wins And again, I don't care the Yankees suck and the Yankees are playing bad ball. You got to beat bad teams, and they continue that trend. Let's see if they can keep it going.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about that in the last episode, talking about the Marlins series. I mean, it was unacceptable for them to just split four with them. And this one, they took care of business. They won both games. They won all four against the Yankees this year. World Series for us, hang the pennant, little brother, yada, 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 all that trash talk, whatever. Okay, so let's get into the meat of this episode. Let's obviously talk about the Christian Scott situation. Now, I did hint about it a little bit because that news dropped last episode about 10 minutes before I went live. So obviously, it's still fresh in everybody's minds as there's only been like 2 days since that episode dropped. So Christian Scott went on the injured list for the 15-day IL for a UCL sprain. And obviously, when you hear that, the UCL is a very important ligament in your elbow that if it is not treated right, or if it has a sprain in it, there could be a possible tear. That leads to a surgery that everybody knows of called Tommy John surgery. So you had a lot of precaution going on, a lot of panic in the last 48 hours of what they were going to do with Christian Scott. Oh my God, is our new ace of the future? Is he going to get hurt? Well, they avoided the worst case scenario. Let's just say that. He does not need surgery, and he's going to be shut down for the next 2 weeks, and there's going to be some progression in that fold. And as of right now, the Mets rotation, they still do have a lot of in-house options. Not many of them are great. And, we also have, the situation of some of our former starters that are in the bullpen as of right now. But, if you were to look at the Mets starting pitching depth without Christian Scott, let's call this the Scott-free unit, something like that, okay? I'm never going to stop doing these word plays. I apologize. Kodai Senga, the top piece, he's set to return off the 60-day IL on Friday. Great to have him back, of course. The Mets have, with Kodai Senga, have let everybody know that even with Christian Scott going down as well, they still will be running out a six-man rotation, obviously to cater to the need of Kodai Senga and his health and how he's kind of used to pitching every 6 days when he was in Japan. Luis Severino has been great. He's been healthy. And we talked a lot about him possibly getting an extension on the last episode. Going to have to put a linchpin in that, obviously, with the trade deadline coming up. But he has been great. He has given us a lot of innings, 115 innings, and it's not even August. I don't think anybody really expected that from Severino. I know Andrew definitely didn't expect that from Luis Severino. Sean Manaea, he's been good. Few hiccups, not great, but of course, held it down in the middle of the rotation, still has been solid. Jose Quintana started off real rough. He's been good recently with Francisco Alvarez behind the dish with him. David Peterson has been somewhat solid, has not been able to give you much distance, but the ERA is good, so I guess we'll say that. Tyler McGill is another option who is going to be plugged into the rotation, whether you like it or not. He's going to make the spot start Saturday against Atlanta in replace of Christian Scott. Jose Budo is another starting option who has been very dominant out of the bullpen since being recalled from AAA. Adrian Hauser is another starting option, but I would not put him under that list, but he did start for us this year. He was removed from the Mets rotation after really, really struggling in late May. Joey Lucchesi is still a possible option, but he's not on the 40-man roster. He was DFA'd last week and was outrighted to AAA Syracuse. Max Kranick is healthy now and is in AAA as of right now. He was claimed off of waivers from Pittsburgh. Impressed a little bit in spring training, but then got hurt. But he is an internal option still. Now, with how they kind of address this, this also brings in the trade deadline discussion of what they possibly do with Christian Scott. Because Christian Scott already, with the injury, this I feel like they kind of feared the whole time. They kind of feared of with his health, of course, with the elbow issues he had last year, the year before that, having the Tommy John surgery. This was the main concern with him as to why they had him on such an innings limit. And it's kind of just showing as to what he's kind of used to and he's not really used to at the major league level. He really is not used to this major league workload. And they're really trying to ease him in with the major league ready stuff that he has. He's obviously had some of his struggles, but the volume we already knew that it was going to be in and out of a tough thing for him adjusting to the major leagues. But right now he is now on the injured list. The impact, this whole situation, Andrew, what would you unpack from this with Christian Scott? Because obviously this is a tough break because this is a young arm that we all had some expectations for. Their top pitching prospect for a while, but he's going to be on the shelf for a little bit.
Yeah, and it definitely maybe changes the expectations for the deadline. Obviously, they need a guy, and we know my history of me and Tyler McGill. We know, again,
Yeah.
he's what he is, and I get, he's getting the start. Again, they really have nobody right now internally unless they wanted to get very crazy, which I'll bring that point up in a second. But again, it made sense. If you're not going to go out and get a guy right now just because Scott got down. Your teams are going to say, "Oh, you need a starting pitcher." The price just went up on, let's say, a guy like Andrew Heaney or kind of like any low-level guy. I think this definitely changes the expectation of they need to add a starter. To what degree of goodness is a conversation. I think they just need to get an arm, a goodiness. If it's good ERA guy or whatever, I think that definitely needs to be brought into the conversation of adding a starting pitcher. And there's a lot of guys, obviously, we have had some names that we'll get to again in a second. But now I say this, that there is a out-of-the-box option, which we'll talk about now. If you aren't going to add for the rotation, obviously the pitching prospects were moved fast. And obviously I'm not talking about Brandon Sproat because I think Sproat is going to maybe get out of time out of the bullpen, maybe if they want to do the Corbin Burns arc. Maybe does this move Blade Tidwell potentially at the end of August? I'm not saying just tomorrow they're going to call up Blade Tidwell, but Blade hasn't looked amazing in AAA. But again, we make the joke AAA offense and just AAA doesn't exist.
It's not even a joke; it's true.
It's just a level, and you saw him dominating AA just like Brandon Sproat. So maybe, do you see Stearns be a little more aggressive? Let's say the price for starting pitching, which is already going to be at ungodly amounts. Maybe again, do you ride Tyler McGill? Can he finagle 2 serviceable starts where it's not 3 innings, 6 runs, and 6 homers? Like, can he give you a Quintana 5 innings, 2-run ball? Like, can he do that? I mean, everyone thinks he has the stuff to do it. Can he finagle 2 to 3 starts? And then if he doesn't, instead of burning prospect capital, why not use it? And I know Mike Vassell would have been the guy that if he would have pitched a little bit better, maybe he would have been a guy that could potentially, maybe he still could be. He's not having the greatest year, but again, like we said, AAA doesn't exist. But, he doesn't have the upside of a guy like Tidwell. So maybe, again, this isn't going to be a tomorrow, or this will probably be by the end of August. If they don't go out and add somebody at the deadline and Tyler McGill continues to struggle, and hell, maybe even David Peterson regresses back to the mean, maybe do you see a flyer at a guy like Blake Tidwell potentially getting some opportunities? Hell, if Brandon Sproat continues to dominate, maybe, he can be used as like a 3 to 4 inning reliever. I don't think you'll see either guy this year. I'm confident probably you won't. But again, expectations change. How their pitching has maybe changed. I know, again, like I said, Tidwell's not having the greatest year in AAA, but maybe Stern sees it as an idea of, why am I going to give up, let's say, an Alex Ramirez for a starting pitcher when I can maybe get similar production? And I can confidently say I think Blake Tidwell can give you the same production as Tyler McGill right now in the major leagues. Like, what McGill gives you, Tidwell has the upside as a younger arm with better stuff, who can give me 5 innings and give up 3 to 4 runs. And that's an idea. Again, it won't be the right now, tomorrow. If Tyler McGill gets rocked tomorrow, next time through, you're not going to see Blake Tidwell. I'm not saying that, but I think it definitely needs to be in the conversation of David Stearns to think, you know what, if I'm not willing to go out and give the price of pitching, maybe I do what I did with Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodard late in the year, bring them up, and hey, get them into a pennant race right away to give them that experience. And in Sproat's case, maybe you don't go get a reliever. You make Sproat a reliever, and Tidwell can be kind of that sixth starter on the rotation. Or hell, maybe you go each of them going 3 to 4 innings apiece, and you do that kind of a fake fugazi bullpen game where you have your two best, pitching prospects paired up, and maybe you get 8 innings, and then you don't have to burn your bullpen. Each guy goes 4 innings of elite stuff, and you're giving them both up. You're giving them major league experience, and again, you're not burning your bullpen instead of going to a guy like Tyler McGill or David Peterson, who you're going to have to burn the bullpen because at the best they're
Yeah.
going to give you 5 innings.
Yeah, and that's one of the main concerns I would say, because I think that Severino, like even tonight, of example, even a guy like Severino, I think I can trust that he can go through 6 innings tonight. I can definitely trust that. So that puts you in a decent spot for the bullpen. But then you have Tyler McGill, who we don't know if he can get out of the 4th inning. So then you're going to have to burn the bullpen that way. And when you get those back-to-back untimely starts, like we just had with Quintana and Minaya, and I talked about this when I had to be frank for his postgame. I talked about this. This is gonna add up. This is gonna add up. This workload is going to add up for this bullpen if you don't add in another starting pitcher, whether it is internally, whether you do believe Brandon Sproat can have like this amazing Noah Syndergaard emergence towards the end of the season. Whatever you want to do. But here's how I look at it in best case scenario. Trade for a starting pitcher. Just get a starting pitcher. Just get a starting pitcher that can give me length. That's it. All you have to do. And I get it. Volume is not really easy to come by these days. And there is a few guys out there who have been able to give volume, and I think that they should be available for a trade, and the Mets should go for them. But they have way too many guys who are susceptible to volume issues. Jose Quintana, we've talked about it. At best, sometimes it's 5 and fly. Sometimes maybe he goes 6 innings when he's at his best. Whatever. Sean Manaea, high pitch counts earlier on in the game. That happens. Severino, I think that we've been decent enough to get volume, but you don't know how long that's going to stay, or how long the House of Cards is going to stay up with him with his injury history and them talking about limiting his innings. Kodai Senga is going to be on a pitch limit when he comes back. And even if he's not, they're going to be very cautious with it. David Peterson, we have not really seen him go deep into games. So you have a lot of guys who are susceptible to being knocked out in the 5th inning, not being able to get past the 6th inning, and it's very taxing to the bullpen. So please trade for a starter that can give you that length. I hope that they do that. Maybe they do get creative, of course, with it internally. But let me just say, after this trade deadline, if your 6th best starting option is Tyler McGill, you're in trouble. And I know how big of a Tyler McGill fan I can be. I root for him so much because I'm a Tyler McGill simp. I get it. But the reality of the situation is he's had the same problems for the last few years. I don't think he's in the starting rotation equation anymore. And I don't think he should be making this start in a crucial game against the Braves. Do I want him to succeed? Absolutely. I'm a huge Tyler McGill fan. And I think he's the greatest pitcher to ever exist. But the problem here is that he is not shown that he can be a consistent starter in the major leagues. We've continued to see these issues, so he should not be in the equation. A week ago, I could have told you with the Christian Scott injury not in the equation, I would have said trade Jose Quintana. We already know that we had a big argument on this podcast about can't trade Quintana. He's so valuable, and then he gets blown up the next day. But that's not really an option anymore because Christian Scott goes down. What my ideal piece was to trade Quintana and move Jose Butto back to the rotation because I believe that he's earned it. He's earned a rotation spot. His type of arm is kind of what you need for these postseason runs that can give you the innings, that can get you outs. Very easy. But now Christian Scott out of the equation, who wasn't giving us volume either, but still an arm, a young arm that we know has a lot of upside. The fact that he's out of the equation now, it kind of brings you to the point where you have a lot of starters in this rotation that can't go distance or are susceptible to not going distance, because sometimes we do get volume from them. But most likely a turn through the rotation, 3 of them don't get out of the 6th inning or don't even get to the 6th inning. So when you look at it from there, they need to add to this rotation. I think that they do. And if they don't, you add Jose Butto back into it and you overload on bullpen. But of course, we'll get into the trade deadline stuff in a second. But this does suck for Christian Scott because I really thought that, we really did see some promise from him. And I know everybody is ready to throw him away. I saw some people on Twitter saying that Tyler McGill has more potential than him. Even if I'd love to troll that, that's not true. So here's how I look at it with the Christian Scott situation. You're going to have a lot of situations where, just like this series, where your starters are not going to be able to get out of the 5th inning or get into the 6th inning. Add somebody to this rotation or believe in Jose Butto, because the other alternative is leaving Tyler McGill in this rotation as the 6th arm if you don't get a starting pitcher, which they cannot do. They just can't do that. Whether you win all 5 games of your other 5 starting pitchers and lose every single game that McGill starts, it just cannot happen. Tyler McGill, as much as I want him to be good, again, he's not in the starting rotation equation anymore for me. Like we've just seen too many times. As our famous co-host, he likes to say, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, makes me a dumbass, or whatever it was. Like at this point, we're running in circles with Tyler McGill. Like this better be the last start that he makes this year. Whether he does get moved to the bullpen, which I just feel like the best way for him in any form of matter is for him to spend the rest of the season in AAA, because that's kind of what he has earned. With the lack of consistency, he has given plenty of chances in this rotation. Anything else to this rotation, then we'll get into the meat of this episode.
No, we think we hit it all again. See if they add an arm, or maybe they're going to bang on some prospects.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, I think that you can put the prospects into the equation because they have done it with Christian Scott. You never know if you catch lightning in a bottle, because Brandon Sproat is a possibility with that because he is an explosive arm. Blade Tidwell is up and down. Sometimes you see good stuff from him, sometimes you don't. Very low floor pitcher, so it's possible that it happens. Again, AAA, different story. But with how the Mets are looking at it with their pitching internally, I mean, we saw it firsthand in that spring breakout game. They have a lot of minor league depth. They do. They have a lot of young arms that could come up here. Somebody who's been pitching very well as well that nobody even talks about, Tyler Stewart, that big 6'8" right-hander we've got. He's probably going to be more of a reliever, but he needs to add like kind of a third pitch or whatever. But he's on his way to a promotion to AAA, so maybe he is a possible option. I don't know if it's down the stretch of the season, but there's some of these guys who are not even being talked about on the top 10 prospect list or whatever, who probably could contribute at the major league level as of right now. But of course, we're kind of getting into that crunch time in the playoff race, and you don't really want to be doing bullpen auditions during the during a playoff race where you're playing teams that you have to beat. So, right now, it really sucks because I really wanted to see Christian Scott, continue to get that workload in the major leagues, get more adjusted to it. I think we saw some really good things from Scott. We saw some bad things. We know what the issues are with him, so we're not really, worried going forward. At least I'm not. I'm just letting him get through the growing pains. But this is just another one where they were kind of just trying to avoid this, which kind of sucks. And I really feel for the guy because, there was a lot of expectation from him, and it kind of just got cut short here. And, hopefully we do see him for the rest of the season, but they obviously, health comes first, and they need to be very cautious with this, especially with a UCL injury, of course, which connects to that big surgery that we all dread with all of our pitchers, which seems to be just a prerequisite these days. But as for the starting pitching, as for the relief pitching, as for this entire roster, you guys know what is coming up in 5 days. The countdown continues to 6 o'clock on July 30th, which is the trade deadline, which we are going to be live for. We're going to be doing some big things for that. So, guys, stay tuned for that, for some announcements in the next coming days. But as for the MLB trade deadline, as for the Mets' current position, we have talked about this a little bit early in the episode, that the Mets are in a different position from 2022, where they can buy, kind of fill in the margins and kind of complete the team to make it a more refined 26-man roster. Because right now, I would say from all 26 to 26, there's like 3 total holes on this team. Like it's a deep team. It really is. We've had a lot of unlikely heroes. We've had a lot of guys overperform, maximize talent really well. The power hasn't really been that big of a problem. And the fact that power is coming from a lot of bats and not really coming from Pete Alonso. Only 20 of the, 120 home runs they've had this year as a team. I mean, it's pretty impressive what they've been able to do. So, if you see them do like a little bit of a soft buy, you could get by with that because they've been able to win games like this. I don't know how long it's going to sustain to the postseason, but you can't blame them for trying at this point where they're in a really good position. And they play well in the next few days. They can jump the Braves. I'm not saying they're going to win the division, but they closed the gap fairly well. I'm pretty sure at one point they were 18 games out of this division. I mean, they've closed the gap. We've seen 10.5 game leads get squandered by teams in the NL East before. We know this firsthand, and not for the good way. So,
and we saw a team this year blow a 10.5 game lead in a division
in like 3 weeks.
In like 24 days. Yeah, in 24 days.
Like that, so. That's crazy. I mean, like, no lead is safe these days, like we say in the NBA. But other than that, let's break down what we would look at for this deadline of what I think the ideal needs are for the Mets. Now, when I look at it, I'd say that the number one thing is obviously the bullpen. We know that the bullpen, they have to address that at this current moment. Of course, the loss of Brooks Raley is a big loss. They lost Drew Smith, even though they have, like Sean Reed Foley or Reed Garrett on their way back from injury. They still do need to fill this in with 1 or 2, maybe even 3 relievers. There has been talk about the Mets possibly going after a bat that is left-handed for outfield help with Starling Marte banged up. Now Harrison Bader banged up a little bit, who could be a left-handed bat. We'll get into that in a second. And of course, the starting rotation, which they could add to with the Christian Scott injury, like we just said. Maybe is there like a bench bat? Maybe you mix in there a utility piece that you can replace Ben Gamel with. Sure, but nothing crazy. So how I think we looked at this is the Mets have been seen as a soft sell, soft buy, corresponding move type of team, bringing in these pieces mid-season. So I think that what we're going to look at it from is I have my soft buy list. I have my big buy list. You have your small buy list and your big buy list of 5 players that address needs for the Mets that are as realistic as we can possibly see for the packages that they would offer, kind of outside of this top 5 prospects that they're probably going to hold on to most likely at the deadline. So I think that, when we talk about small buy, like we said, there's not as many holes on this roster as compared to 2022. So you can fill in the margins with marginal players who can kind of be some upgrades to these guys who are on this roster right now, such as DJ Stewart. I'm looking at you. Ben Gamel. I'm looking at you. maybe it's Alex Young who gets taken out of this bullpen because he's kind of a fringe guy for AAA. Maybe Danny Young. They upgrade from that with a left-hander in the bullpen. So with soft buy, I think that there are some options out there, and I think that there's more options than big buy. But soft buy for you, Andrew, I'm going to let you explain your list as to what you think the Mets would look like from a soft buy list of your top 5 trade deadline targets in that regard. So I'm going to pull up your list here. You have a top 5. Guys, you can let us know in the chat of who you would do as like kind of a soft buy. Some guys that you can suggest, we'll plug them in there. We'll talk about our opinions on those as well. But here is Andrew's soft buy list. Andrew, what do you have with your top 5? How would you explain it? How are you plugging this into this team?
I guess look at it as both lists have 2 relievers, 2 outfielders, and a starting pitcher or like a swingman option. And you look at my list, you see a couple of potential bundle opportunities. Like I said earlier, and like I've said a lot, that the Mets could maybe go to one team, and there's a couple of teams that you can fill 2 holes with one trade instead of going out and calling 2 teams to make one trade with each of them. So we'll start with the bottom 4, the bottom of the list. Dylan Floro, again, like I said early with Phil Maton, I think filling that kind of 6th and 7th, high, mid, low leverage guys who can be kind of that part 2 of the bullpen, like we called the B squad last year when we had David, when we thought we had a really good bullpen when Diaz went out of like that B. Dylan Floro can be that kind of Adam Ottavino replacement. He's having a very good year. Yes, he doesn't throw hard, which we don't, normally like we obviously have been praising and wanting more velocity in the pen. He is more similar to that Phil Maton role, a good ground ball pitcher, having a good year this year with the Washington Nationals. And again, with the bundling situation, yes, our good buddy Jesse Winker, who's had a resurgence this year. Like we said, a left-handed bat off the bench. If Starling Marte's health can get back to being healthy, to have a guy in the intermediate that can play every day or potentially maybe give JD Martinez a day off a DH. Jesse Winker's having an amazing year. And wouldn't it be funny after all this, the guy finally have Mets fans actually cheer for the guy?
He's from here. So
he's from here, so
he's
bring him
from
home.
Here.
Then we go to a guy like Alex Lang. Alex Lang had a electric season last year. This year struggled. The Tigers have sent him back down to the minor leagues because he did have kind of a walk problem. He's 28 years old, having 4 years of team control. You're buying low on a guy who was elite in 2023. The Tigers maybe have given up. So again, the price to acquire is not going to be great high. Also has some closer experience. Again, like I said, maybe in that second unit of the bullpen, maybe he can be a very, one of these guys that Stearns brings in who's had success in the big leagues before, has great stuff. Again, has a walk problem, which we've made it clear in the Mets bullpen. We're tired of seeing walks. Again, he was sent down for that reason to fix it up. But again, a guy who can give you high elite, high leverage number when he's going right, and we saw it in 23 to bring into the pen and kind of a buy low option. And then we'll get to 2 and 1 being the other bundle on the list. And I have made it clear I do not like bringing back the old friend just because all for the vibes. But you know what? I'm allowed to do it. One, Michael Conforto is a rental. He's not going to be high on the price to acquire list. And hell, just for the vibes for Brandon Nimmo, and maybe gets Nimmo back on track, to have his best friend back with him, because the power of friendship, if Pete Alonso's allowed to keep Jeff McNeil for 10 years, you know what? Give my captain, Brandon Nimmo, his best friend back, and go get Michael Conforto, who can be, again, you bring him back, he doesn't have to be the guy that he was in 2015 and 16, where he was seen as the chosen one. Now he can just be a guy hitting in that, again, like I said, between Alvarez and Vientos, a left-handed power cornerback who can hit the bottom of the lineup. And yes, he's not as good as he was before. He's getting older. But wouldn't it be funny to bring him back, bring him home on a potential playoff run? And again, the price to acquire isn't going to be a lot because he's a rental and he's making a decent amount of money. The Giants would most likely want to offload his contract. And number 1, for me, Taylor Rogers. Obviously, Jake Diekman had a outing against the Yankees that, is not going to blind my overall season note that he has been bad. And again, is a guy who has closer experience with the Minnesota Twins, is a guy that David Stearns has already acquired in the past at an MLB trade deadline. Obviously, he was the major league piece in the Josh Hader trade. and giving you the ability to have a secondary closer so guys like Jake Diekman doesn't have to close. You don't have to use Daniel Nunez as the closer because Taylor Rogers has had this success. And I have a lefty. I know me and Carson and obviously Frank have believed that I'd rather just have 7 good relievers compared to
Yeah.
having to have a lefty. But it's a nice bonus to have a very good lefty be one of the 7 or 8 guys in the pen. And Taylor Rogers gives you that ability of being a former closer, being a guy that Stearns has acquired in the past. And again, he does have a little bit of money on his contract next year. So again, the Giants would probably want to offload that contract about $12 million next year. And then you go in next year not having to pay that on the open market for another fringe reliever that can be given $12 million. You have him as a secondary high leverage arm as well as a secondary closer. And again, price of acquired, and you see 2 teams together, you can do the bundle of adding a left-handed corner outfielder as well as having a high leverage, potential high leverage arm or secondary closer.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I really like this list because it's really a good marginal list, and it's just the best way to really describe it because, it's more of just plugging in pieces. It's not really the frontline pieces that are like the big names on the market. But, I think that these guys can basically make just the roster deeper in general. And I think that that's just the best way as to look at it because, Taylor Rogers, the closing experience. We already know that his brother's also still there and with the Giants, right? Is that Tyler Rogers? I confuse all of them.
Yeah, Taylor, Tyler, all throwing
Yeah,
three-corner weird deliveries and all kind of crap.
yeah. Michael Conforto, I think that we've kind of just come to the point where he's pretty much the only option out there. That's like a left-handed, somewhat power bat, who doesn't like completely like stink at anything else. Here's the thing about Jesse Winker, and I've talked about this before. This would be a platoon bat, and personally, I think that Michael Conforto is just the better balance with that, and I think that you think that too because you had to rank over him. With Jesse Winker, I think that we're kind of talking about it as with the outfield, you're kind of trying to replace a little bit more of Marte. And Starling Marte, one of the biggest weaknesses this year, we've talked about it before. His defense has been horrendous. He's been the worst defensive right fielder. Even if you put Winker in left field or right field, his defense is terrible. It's almost just as bad as Starling Marte. So I feel like that would be a little bit more of a marginal player as compared to Michael Conforto, who at his best can contribute offensively. Defensively, he's not amazing at it, but as compared to a guy like Jesse Winker, who is just so awful in the outfield, um, you know, it's really hard to see, what they do with the outfield, of course, because Marte, he's saying that he's close to coming back, but then he's also not running at this current moment. I mean, I don't even know what that situation is, but I think that, I do like what you have on this list. I like it. I really do like the thought. Again, you have to bring in the part of it as to where Mike Rizzo has basically cut the phone line with the Mets, the Nationals, ever since what was it the Jerry Blevins for Matt Den Decker trade. So it's been a really long time since the Mets and Nationals have made a trade. And again, I don't think that the Nationals are really competing. They're probably mostly likely going to sell. But the thing about this is that we've seen Rizzo shut the door on us before. It's not even just Juan Soto. We've seen him shut the door on Josh Bell before with us. There's been a lot of situations where Mike Rizzo wants absolutely nothing to do with us. And I think that's a thought you can make, but you never know. I said that the Knicks and Nets haven't made a trade since the '80s, and they just did for Mikal Bridges. So you never know what you set into motion when you say something like that. But I think that is a really good list to kind of fill the margins, kind of buying low on some guys who, at their best, can give you, frontline stuff, whether it is, as a hitter or as a pitcher, as a reliever. Uh, Basically, addition by really small subtraction with what you have to give up with them. So for me, I also have my small buy list. And I would say that I'm kind of looking at it more heavily from pitching. I obviously have Michael Conforto on there as well. We know how much of a Conforto fan I've been since he was born. But I kind of just look at it as the move. Like if there was a Michael Conforto um, situation where uh, you know there's somebody else on his team who's a lot better, where the Giants are selling, where somebody else is available, I'd probably go for them. But he kind of seems like the only viable option as of right now. Now, Michael Kopech, of course, really has struggled to stay healthy, to stay on the field, also with consistency. But we all know about the explosiveness that he can bring out of the bullpen. And he could be somebody who maybe you attach to a guy like Eric Fetty, who I also have on this list. Coming off from the KBO, has really invented his stuff. The Mets were finalists for Eric Fetty in free agency. He decided to go to the White Sox. How did that work out for you, buddy? They are terrible. But no hard feelings. Maybe they do trade for somebody like Eric Fetty, who can kind of give you some volume out of the rotation, who this year I'm pretty sure has more innings than anybody who has made a start for the Mets this year. I might have to correct that. I'm not sure. I believe Eric Fetty is spelled with a K as well, so I apologize for the typo there. But yeah, 117.2 innings. That is more than anybody in the Mets rotation. Number one, of course, we talk about bullpen as the main need here for the trade deadline. That being Lucas Erceg. Now, a lot of people are talking about Mason Miller as the main piece that can go back. But Lucas Erceg is also a fantastic arm, a huge sinker baller. Throws not as hard as Mason Miller, but can touch 100. Big contact manager, coming off of a really big. He has basically broke out this year. He probably would be like their only all-star if Mason Miller wasn't so good. But he's kind of flown under the radar. He's the eighth inning guy. He can be a setup guy, a back end type of piece. But you also can buy low, mainly because the A's are the A's, and they will accept any type of garbage to get rid of any type of player with a pulse, because that's basically how they're ran, and it's an absolute disgrace. But you could take advantage of it because it is what it is. But Lucas Erceg, also another connection you can have. He was a David Stearns draft pick back when he was in Milwaukee. So there is a little bit of a connection there. And then the other arm I have on here is a lefty, and that being A.J. Puck, who was on the A's, was traded to the Marlins, and the Marlins right now, one of the worst teams in all of baseball. They are definitely going to be selling at the deadline. It depends on what the division tax is, but I would go for somebody like A.J. Puck. Like we have said, we would like to see really good pitchers no matter what, whether they throw with their left hand or their right hand or with their toes. It doesn't matter as long as they get you outs, as long as they get you strikeouts and blow people away with high leverage stuff, get ground balls, whatever. But are able to work out of these situations. AJ Puck, of course, he can be a little bit wild at times, but if you can harvest the stuff that he has had for a long time, that can be a really effective left-handed reliever. And I believe AJ Puck right now, he has 3 years of control. He's a free 2 years of control, maybe. He's a free agent after 2027, so you have some control there. It all depends on the asking price, of course. He hasn't had the best season, but it seems like there has been a lot of batted ball luck for him. Of course, if you're looking at ERA, 4.3, and fielding independent pitching, 3.62. So there is a little bit of luck involved there. Of course, he throws hard, tons of strikeout stuff. Strikeouts are down this year, walks are up, but something that you could possibly untap under the lab of Cerns, shall we say. So my small buy list. Any opinions on that? What do you think, Andrew? Anything that you would like to add to this type of list? What do you think?
I mean, again, obviously you have the priority of adding a reliever and obviously adding bullpen. And there's plenty of guys. Again, obviously all those guys throw 100 in Ched, which we definitely like. And again, having AJ Puck, it's been a guy we've been talking about on this show for about 2 years now. Even before he got traded to Miami, when he was in Oakland, we wanted him. So having 2 years of team control as well, again, not just being a 1 year kind of one and done as a rental like Tanner Scott would be. You're probably asking for more prospect capital. But again, that nerd Peter Benedict's Probably will just have, can get him for a box of cookies, and then you add a guy who can be a high and low leverage arm if he's going well, but also having a guy who's got good stuff from the left side. Obviously, Herseg, again, a guy that throws 100, again, as a high leverage arm, adding more velocity. Fetty has been linked to the Mets for the last year. Again, the White Sox should not be are looking to trade everything that has a pulse.
Another
Again,
thing you
maybe
can factor in, because I talked about Mike Rizzo, also Jerry Reinsdorf fucking
Reinsdorf
hates
does hates
Steve
those.
Cohen. So, that's something you could consider with Kopech and Fetty, but,
And
if there
here's
are
I guess
options out
the
there.
other
Yeah.
and there's other thing, especially with Chris Getz, we've seen how he's kind of in the I like to model this as an NBA term, but a Danny Ainge where he's only going to make a trade if he is the clear winner. He doesn't so far as making trades to be like, you know what, I'll take 75 cents. He looks to always in some of his trades. Even you saw for Aaron Bummer, got like 7 pieces for Aaron Bummer. Like you've seen some of the
Yeah.
trades where in like and you've seen the reports of obviously Crochet and Robert. So he is kind of maybe in that school of I'm not going to make a trade unless I win. So again, obviously then you add the Reinsdorf as well as Rizzo for my side of again more obstacles only the Mets have to deal with because of course the Mets can't just have even playing field with other 29 other teams. But again, there's a lot of quality arms like Conforto we've talked about, but a lot of names that we've been talked about on our channel for years. Obviously, Urseg is the newest guy of those five guys that have been added to the Mets weekly trade partner trade target discussion. So again, a
Yeah.
more velocity, high quality stuff, and term. Which again, my main thing is if you're going to make a trade, I am very hesitant for rentals unless I'm giving up nothing. So I prefer, and I think Stearns has that same philosophy of, hey, this isn't the all-in year, so we don't need to fully go on rentals. If I'm going to trade for quality prospect capital, again, Conforto's a different discussion because he hasn't been amazing and it shouldn't be as high for him. But if I'm going to add a high leverage late inning reliever, I want a guy with term, and that's why for me Tanner Scott is not on my list, and not spoiler, he's
Yeah.
not on my list, and is not a target for me because I'm not giving up the prospect capital for a guy that's only going to have less than about 45 games in a Met uniform, and isn't guaranteed to be here for future runs when we're expected to be more of a championship pedigree team.
Yeah, I think that when you look at it as a whole, the Mets just really have like this soft buy of where you do have a lot of options on this market. It's not just like the 10 players or like, I think it was like 9 players because we both had Michael Conforto on there. There's a very big selection of marginal players, of small pieces that can come from not many, let's just say not many teams out there because, you have that extra wild card spot. But there are a decent amount of bullpen arms you can pretty much find anywhere. But when I look at it, I'd say that Eric Fetty is somebody to kind of look out for. Obviously, with the Mets having the connection to him in free agency, so they obviously have interest. They've expressed interest before. He hasn't been amazing, like overall. Like you could probably see him regress a little bit, but he really has been a solid, and I mean solid arm this year, just coming out of nowhere from the KBO, where he was one of the worst starters in all of baseball. Refined his game in the KBO in 2023, comes back in 2024, and he's been one of the most consistent pieces to the White Sox. And the White Sox are a horrendous team, but he has been one of their bright spots. And has become a really good signing for them. And I mean, if you look at his game logs, I only see like 2 or 3 starts where he did not get past the 6th inning. I mean, you're getting a lot of volume from this guy. And some 5 inning performances. There was one where he got knocked out, but that was like back in May, in 4 1/3. So I mean, he's been giving a lot of volume, and let's just say he has pitched a lot of innings this year. And he doesn't throw relatively hard. He can touch 95. His velo is up. His stuff is a lot better. Reinvented his stuff to the max. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he could touch 95, something like that. But he's got the cutter. He's got the sinker. A lot of tunnel movement. Let's just say that. And I think that that's a good move as to where if you want to fill in the margins for another starter, kind of bring in the quantity, of course, if you're not really looking for the star power. But let's just say that the Mets, like we've said, is a strong possibility. Let's say they take all 4 games from the Braves. That would put them 9 games over 500. That will get them 2 games ahead of Atlanta for the first wild card spot. I don't know if the Phillies start losing or whatever. Maybe you gain some ground on them during the week. That puts them in an even bigger of a spot as to where, they're beating the Braves, who we didn't expect them to be, even though they're in a very vulnerable position as compared to what we expected them to be. Maybe there's a possibility that they do a big buy. Maybe they go after some frontline pieces because they do have a little bit of a surplus of prospects. Not as much as compared to a team like the Orioles, or you're talking about like a team like Seattle, or you're talking about like a team like is it
Baltimore,
Pittsburgh,
the Dodgers,
Dodgers have a conglomerate like that. But the Mets do have a selection. Like they do have a little bit of a log jam that maybe they can offload some pieces. Maybe. Who knows? But when you look at the big buy list, I do want to bring up your list first because I do find it a little bit interesting, and I'll tell you why I do. But you can explain it first as to what you would put on your big buy list of these marquee guys who could make a bigger contribution as compared to these marginal players. So what do you got here on your list?
Yeah, I mean, we pull it up here. Again, you're seeing another high leverage arm at the bottom. We'll start with kind of the least known of the big buys, and that's Jason Foley. Again, the Tigers are in a weird spot where, again, maybe they trade Tariq Skubal, maybe they don't. Maybe, obviously Jack Flaherty seems to be gone. And maybe if Tariq Skubal is moved, Jason Foley potentially is in that trade to Baltimore or someone like that. But to have a guy, again, electric stuff, fastball slider, guy that can hit 97, 98, having, and again, a secondary closer is the kind of a big thing for me. Again, to have the situations for Jake Diekman not to be a guarantee, having an option of, hey, Jake Diekman's the only guy you got in the pen in that second group that has to close games, or Adam Ottavino. Foley's a very interesting arm to look at for the Tigers if they are kind of exploding that team of them just being stuck in a weird spot. Go to 4, and it's Brent Rooker. Here, and I guess we can combine both of them, and that being Randy Arozarena and Brent Rooker. I'm looking at this in a fact of we don't know what the hell is going on with Starling Marte. Even if you get Starling Marte, you don't know how long you're going to get him until potentially another injury. As well, now Harrison Bader is out, and also Harrison Bader is a pending UFA. There is no guarantee Harrison Bader is on this roster next year. And if I could talk into this, obviously what we want to talk about, the big guys in free agency, and even still, in the case of Rooker, JD Martinez is no longer here after next season. So if you were to go out and splurge in the outfield market this offseason, but then in Brent Rooker's case, you could shift him to be the DH every day to hit, the 25 to 30 nukes that he's done the last couple of years, and being a kind of a insurance policy, especially for this season. And again, hopefully this series against the Yankees is the start of a Pete Alonso breakout, but to kind of reinsure this offense of having another guy that can hit 30 home runs in this lineup and is deepening in this already murderers row, the low-key murderers row that we've created to have. And again, like I said, if JD Martinez were to leave, potentially Pete Alonso were to leave, that opens up some flexibility for him to move in if you are interested in those outfielders. Randy is not having a good year, and I think that's a lot of why the Rays would move him because, one, he's going to be in arbitration, only has 2 years left, I believe, of team control. One, I think it's this year and next year, I believe that. I didn't fact check that, but anyway, he has at least another year or two of team control. And I'm looking at Randy, especially then you could potentially pair him with my guy in the number 2 spot, or any of the Rays elite high leverage arm, a guy like Pete Fairbanks, a guy like Jason Adam, a guy like Eric Cleveridge. You could have literally just put Ray's high leverage arm, any of them would have fit perfectly in that number 2 spot. But obviously this year has not been good. But if the Mets are going to be a playoff team, there's a certain player when the lights are brightest. And I do think if you were to bring Randy Arozarena, you've seen it in the WBC. You sure as hell have seen it in the postseason. This dude is different in regular season games compared to when the lights are and the cameras are on. This dude is a completely different player. And to potentially shift him to left field, Brandon Nimmo, if Harrison Bader, and we saw a report that he's better, But again, you have some concern with your outfield, maybe shifting Nimmo back to right or back to center, and you add another guy and keeping Randy in left. You're adding a guy who, if you're getting to the playoffs, which you want to go, who's been one of the greatest postseason hitters of all time, I'll take my chances of buying low and potentially tacking on a high leverage arm from Tampa Bay. I do Pete Fairbanks on it. Again, it could be Jason Adam. It could be Garrett Clevenger. Again, any raised generic white reliever, high leverage guy, he fits perfectly for what I want in that bundle with Tampa Bay, potentially adding a Rosarena because Tampa Bay always is trying to shed salary. Randy's going into ARB. Pete Fairbanks has some term and a player option or a club option for team control. And then you get to nasty Nate Eovaldi. And this is a guy that I wanted before he signed with Texas and definitely has pushed. He was 5 on my list. Now he's moved to 1 with the injury to Christian Scott. The Mets need it if they are going to play a wild card series. Kodai Senga, if he's close to being back to what Kodai Senga is, he's most likely pitching game 1. You would think Luis Severino, if he continues to pitch well and is healthy, is going to pitch game 2. You don't have a quality number 3 starter to pitch in a playoff series. I wouldn't have put that on Christian Scott. I sure as hell don't want it to be Sean Manaea or Jose Quintana. The problem with Nate Eovaldi is if he is available, and again, a guy like Tariq Skubal is probably not getting moved unless Baltimore blows the Tigers away. The price for Crochet is astronomical, and Chris Getz has to hold on to him because nobody hits that price tag. And the Rangers are selling. Nate Eovaldi is going to be the most wanted pitcher on the free agent market from any contender. The Dodgers, the Orioles, the Phillies. Everyone is going to be in on Nate Eovaldi, meaning you're going to have to pay more than you would most likely expect for a guy who's had, a pretty solid season, but on a good team's probably a 3, you would think. And obviously he's had the postseason success, so that can definitely raise his price. But right now, Eovaldi for me is I'm willing to go kind of higher prospect capital. Yes, because he has a vesting option for about $20 million next year that most likely he's going to hit. So you have him for at minimum 2 playoff runs, you hope. And you have a guy you can feel a lot confident in and not having to go Sean Manaea, Jose Quintana, or anyone else in this rotation to pitch game 3 in a playoff series. And hell, maybe if you win the first 2 in the wild card, he can start game 1, and what his track record in the postseason, coming out of the bullpen, as well as coming out as a starter and a reliever. So for me, Eovaldi is the top of my wish list. It's not going to probably happen because, again, the price is definitely going to be astronomical because of the seller's market and the fact that Chris Getz and the Tigers GM, it's no longer Alex Avila, I don't know who the Tigers GM now is, are going to have their top flight guys be stupid expensive. Then all the big market teams will definitely shift and pivot to Texas and Chris Young for any of their starting pitchers. And again, guys like potentially even John Gray, Andrew Heaney, like we talked about earlier, just adding a type of arm. The Rangers will probably be that holding the market for starting pitching.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing that I do question with your list, obviously, is that there's just no left-handed bat on here. Like I get it, like the names of the big names, of course, but a pending free agent whose contract times have stalled. I mean, I would say that this is the perfect opening where you talk about, a man named Anthony Santander, but the Orioles
they're not
are buying. They're probably not going to move him. I get it.
No.
But, I think that these are all guys that fill in a really big role for them. Brent Rooker probably doesn't fill in the Marte role where he can use all the tools. He's kind of just a pure hitter. But also there is a lot of, insurance you can get, of course, with JD Martinez. Probably not going to be here. And then also just the uncertainty with the outfield where you have 2 outfielders kind of banged up as of right now. Where he can play the corners. He's not great at it, but
yeah. And even the point of there is no good left-handed outfielder available. Like there isn't. Like if we get they're in the marginal average column. There isn't like a Soto. Santander is not available. We saw that stupid report about Texas being involved with him. Baltimore's not. I mean, yes, they have a conglomerate of young outfielders, but they'll rather have him be in the playoff run and then lose him for a qualifying offer draft pick. So there really isn't a high level, like I would have potentially said Jock Peterson, but the Diamondbacks are looking to buy. So like that would have been the kind of that top, but even he's more of a kind of a marginal piece than he is kind of like both of these guys in Rooker and Rosarena. One, we know Randy in the postseason is a game changer, and Rooker has, in Oakland has had production, and again, he can play. You stick him in left field. I don't care about Brandon Nimmo's arm in right field. I don't give a rat's ass about that. Give me the best 9. I just like the Phillies.
You
I don't
don't?
care. The Phillies don't give a shit about their arms in the outfield. They give me the best 9 bats. We'll figure out the arm crap. Who cares? Like, it does not matter. Like, yeah,
You
Starling
don't?
Marte is nice,
Well,
but nobody cares.
here's how I look at it. I on a good day, I'm still not putting Nimmo in right field because of the arm. Obviously, it's either center field or left field because he's proven to be able to play both of those positions.
Then you could shift Bader to right and Nimmo to center if you feel that much. Oh, God forbid you need
Yeah,
the arm. You shift Bader to
yeah,
right,
and I
and there
understand
you
that,
go.
and we also don't know what's going to go on with Starling Marte. But when you're going to
Yeah.
talk about noodle arms, and most likely you're going to have to replace Starling Marte, who might be, then Easy before this, 2 comments before this, you said Mark Canna, whose arm is also horrendous. So I'm just saying that you're going to have to plug in somebody that probably can play, I don't know, at least 2 of the 3 outfield positions if you're going to try and bring somebody in for Marte. You do have, a spot with Ben Gamble that you can possibly replace as well. But, I think there's a strong possibility that they do bring in somebody for the outfield. Is it possible that it is Michael Conforto? Is it possible that it's somebody that we didn't even know was available? Maybe. It looks like Yastrzemski's going to be available. Conforto's going to be available. Flores is going to be available. Flores right-handed bat. I mean, they're going to need. I've never been a righty-lefty type of guy, but for this type of ballpark that they have, which is such a pull hitter's park, especially to the right field wall, it would be nice to add in a left. Add in a left field. Add in a left-handed bat to this lineup. Now, as for my big list, I have 2 guys on here. It's not going to happen. Like, for me, I've kind of been looking at this as the soft buy for the entire time, filling in those margins, kind of just, moving forward and making it just a 26-man roster. But as when I talk about it, I also have Nathan Eovaldi on here because, the postseason experience is there. And I think that I also have Brent Rooker as well because, my connection to Oakland. So I have those 2 guys that I'm copping you off of. Number 5 I have is Carlos Esteves, who is one of the best relievers in all of baseball, who doesn't get talked about because the Angels are garbage. But he did sign that big what was it? That like 3-year, was it a 3-year contract? So you would be taking on a little bit of money, but he is a solidified back end piece to a bullpen. 2 years, so he would have another year of control, I believe. I don't know. Or maybe he's a free agent after this year. So he probably will just get free. Yeah, so he'll probably just get traded or whatever. But even if you talk about it from just the roster standpoint, I still see Jeff McNeil as a weakness. I still do. Whether you're riding high on his power surge recently, I still do. So I do have Jonathan India on there. If he is made available, I would make the call. Obviously, that is a right-handed bat, so it's a right-handed bat added to this lineup. But I'm not investing into Jeff McNeil ever again. It's never going to happen. So whether you think that he's legit or not, I still will forever see him as a guy who is not a future part of this team. Sorry. Whether you want to get mad at that or not, he's just not a future part of this team. Jonathan India, way younger, years of control. Is there a strong possibility that happens? Who knows? And then at number 1, I've seen a lot of people talking about Chris Bassett, but how about his teammate, Kevin Gausman, who I would like to see be made available. I did see a report that they most likely will keep Gausman and they will keep Bassett with Toronto, which they really shouldn't. But when you look at it from a volume standpoint, I need somebody like Kevin Gausman. We know that the Mets were attached to him 2 years ago. They signed Max Scherzer. They offered more money to Gausman. He went to Toronto. But I think I would consider revisiting that with Kevin Gausman, kind of giving you a piece that can give you guaranteed volume out of the starting rotation, give you 6 innings at least, because that is what they desperately need. And then also the stuff that he has, which is frontline stuff. I know that he struggled a little bit this year, of course, but he is definitely my number one target of who I really desperately would take and give up a decent amount. Not like my entire top 5, but I would give up a top 10 prospect for somebody like Kevin Gausman, who does have years of control as well, and also can provide me that volume that they desperately need in this rotation. So this list, break it down. Andrew, anybody that you would add, subtract by opinion? Again, I know Jonathan India is a big question mark for everybody, but Jeff McNeil is not a future piece of this team. I don't give a shit how many home runs he's hit in the last week.
Yeah, I mean, Estevez is a rental, by the way. So again, price.
Yeah, he is a rental.
But so let's again, the India part for me, and I think a lot. It's not even that I've made it clear I don't believe in fucking Jeff McNeil. I'd rather, we know this, but the Mets have, especially for this. I'm just talking strictly this season. We'll reconvene this conversation in the offseason. Internally, the Mets can figure out second base. I'm not burning assets for any of Jonathan India, and Jonathan India isn't even, for me, a guy that I'm like, okay, like if Brandon Lau, that's a more interesting power bat at second base than a guy like Jonathan India, who, yes, is having a better season and hitting the ball harder than he's ever had in his career. And obviously some people in Seattle, obviously Seattle fans have been different because they didn't want to touch him at all. Now, obviously, he's hitting the ball harder. So, and also how much of that is Great American Small Park as well. But for me, if we're just
not much as you think, not as much as you think.
But again, you still have that kind of, and yes, his dad. We know the stories of Jonathan India's dad being a huge Mets fan. I think he said that on Foul Territory.
Why I had him on here. Come on now.
So again, he's a big Mets fan. His dad's a big Mets fan, but whatever. But for me, internally, second base can be solved. Obviously, again, you're getting production out of Jose Iglesias. We know Jeff McNeil. We'll see how long this Beaver run lasts. But again, you have guys internally for strictly this season. I'm not wasting assets on second base. That's why, again, I've prioritized, and I think the Mets will prioritize pitching and outfield. So again, Indy's a fine player. Is he better than Jeff McNeil? Of course. But again, if I'm just talking strictly this season, you're looking at more a longer term outlook. Yeah. I'm not. I think especially this deadline.
I just want to get rid of Jeff McNeil.
I know we all know this, and he'll be dead in the offseason.
Fuck out of here! And this is a big buy list, okay? This is dreaming. And even dreamer, okay?
And even again, India isn't the again. There would have been better options again. Potentially even Lau, maybe even a Nolan Gorman. Who knows? But again, for me, second base. Again, I know he's young and he's having, but for me, second base this season, I think can you stick internally and continue this? Jose.
Yeah, I know you can. I know you can. But you can talk about it internally as well because Luisano Acuna's there, Jet Williams is there. I get it. I understand it, but I don't put prospects in the.
I know, but
I don't put prospects in the equation, especially when you're a big market team like this. Like I'm just like if you're like the Marlins or you're the Pittsburgh Pirates and you're like, oh well, we have this prospect that can fill in. Okay. But with the Mets, I mean, this is a big market team. So if you're thinking big, you think big. Give me an upgrade at second base because Jeff McNeil's horrendous. I don't give a shit how many home runs he's hit in the last week.
But again, this is strictly for this season. Again, second base is not a need. Keep hitting him 9 because it gives you production.
I mean, you also have Jose Iglesias, who's played a starting caliber player. Like
so
that.
Again, I'm not.
Also,
I get it. Again, India. Sure, the Yankees now are interested in India, so you already have crosstown teams potentially in the conversation.
With Lau having the struggles that he has had, you could have a second base platoon type of thing with Jose Iglesias and Brandon Lau.
And the Rays aren't going to fit in.
Lau has been good, but we all know that there is some frustrating points to him as a hitter. And also in the postseason, he's one of the worst bats ever. But again, that's more of a narrative than anything. But I think that, when it comes to the trade deadline, the Mets have a lot of options in front of them. I feel like they're going to evaluate them fairly well. I trust David Stearns to do his thing and, kind of just build up the roster. I think a lot of people were questioning him during the offseason of some of the moves that he made, but a lot of them have turned to pay off. A lot of these guys have really helped us win in the margins and just build a deeper team. I know everybody wants Juan Soto. Everybody wants Shohei Ohtani, but at the end of the day, you need a team to win. All right, so they're 26 to 26. That's the best way to do it. If you have a deep roster, That's how you win games. That's how you win games down the stretch. You need to fill in all the gaps, and the Mets don't really have many gaps to fill in, so they could do a soft buy and still compete in the postseason. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, we are going to be going live for the last hours of the trade deadline. We have tons of stuff planned for that, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But obviously, I want to talk about the Mets injury report. Final thoughts. We'll cut it off short here because again, there's not really much space between these last two episodes, so there's not really much to talk about besides the trade deadline. We obviously can bring up some other discussions, go for a little bit of an encore that way. But as for the injury report, we have hinted most of it so far, but let me just put it all in one place. Christian Scott, obviously, we have talked about throughout this episode. He will not require any UCL/elbow surgery, but he is expected to be shut down from throwing for 2 weeks. And of course, he was placed on the 15-day IL with the UCL sprain on Tuesday. So good news there. Cross our fingers that hopefully we can see him towards the end of the season. Reed Garrett, remember him? The guy that we've basically burnt out completely. He threw from 100 feet on Monday, and he is very hopeful to be able to throw off the mound this weekend, and he is currently on the 15-day injured list. We don't know if he is going to have a rehab assignment or not, but he should be good to go to plug back into this bullpen that has definitely had some bumpy pieces in it. Even though we want to see them add at the deadline with the bullpen, Reed Garrett definitely could give us a little bit of a boost, especially with his arm being a little bit more fresher as compared to what it was at the pace that he was going, basically putting them out there every single day to die. Harrison Bader rolled his ankle attempting to steal a base on Tuesday night. I don't know if it was when he stole second or stole third, but he did leave the game in a walking boot. But the tests were all negative. He is considered day-to-day, and I did just see a report from Carlos Mendoza before the game today that he is available to come off the bench if needed. So that is good news. Also, Sean Reed-Foley, he threw batting practice on Thursday night before his rehab assignment. That was supposed to be last night, but he did push it back because of mechanical tweaks. And obviously, the injury history with him, they just want to be a little bit cautious. But he will be facing hitters on Friday, and he will most likely begin his rehab assignment on Sunday for High A Brooklyn, which he was supposed to do yesterday. So, as for the injury report, as for everything that we talked about, anything else you want to put on the table? Because we do have a little bit of a window of time. Any other trade ideas for the trade deadline? We can have a little bit of a discussion there because I know that you have a big brain when it comes to this stuff, Andrew. So,
I mean, we haven't done studs and duds. I mean, we still have to do studs and duds.
We did not do studs and duds. Thank you for reminding me. Studs and duds. One player that we really liked throughout this series, and one player that we didn't. There was a lot of positives for this one. Thank you for reminding me to do that because it's everyone's favorite. Studs, who do you got?
I'll do a thing that probably I'll never be able to give this guy the stud of the week ever again. Let's give it to Jake Diekman. Striking out Aaron Judge. I mean, yes, you could go to the obvious answer. There's plenty of guys in this offensive that could give it. But you know what? I'm in a great mood. We've buried this guy under 10 to bajillion miles of shit. I'll give Jake Diekman a flower of being able to strike out the best hitter on the planet when we all kind of knew he was going to hang a slider, and we all thought, oh, there's a walk-off two-run homer. And for Mendoza to give Jake Diekman the ability to show the set of balls he had to get out to strike out Aaron Judge. So for a one-time opportunity, I'll give Jake Diekman a little bit of love.
All right, I got to give it to Francisco Lindor. I mean, just an incredible game that he had in that first game. Continues to own the Yankees. OPS well above 800 now for the season. Remember that time when everybody wanted him dead in April? I mean we've seen that many times when he starts off slow. But Francisco Lindor is a good player, whether you believe it or not. And he's been money from that leadoff spot. And hopefully it continues into the stretch, into the playoffs for us. I mean, you also can talk about Jeff McNeil, too. But I gave Jeff McNeil his flowers last episode, and that was a few days ago, so I don't think it has weared off yet. But he's definitely looked a lot more like a competitive baseball player as compared to what he's been doing this season. Now let's get to the duds. Andrew?
Again, it's kind of hard to have a guy who's been bad when you pound the Yankees, and there was a lot of positivity. I'm gonna go just based on game one because game two was obviously there was an offensive explosion, and Adam Ottavino just coming in that first game and just not being able to, I know, yes, he got the big out in game two, but that first, when the game was close in game one, him coming in right away and getting him up two base runners right away, Art and Mendy has to quickly pull him out of that game, just shows more of what he has been, and obviously he gets the big out in game two. But just, again, showing that he's not a big league reliever anymore, and like enough's enough. I know, yes, you could say Brandon Nimmo striking out a shit ton. Yeah, the one guy doesn't get a hit, which maybe you'll say. But again, when the offense is scoring 12 runs, I'm not really caring about if one singular dude's 0 for 4. Like if Jeff McNeil, if this was anybody, again, there's a lot more positive and negative. If you want to give Nimmo because he went 0 for 5, sure, that's an easy option if you wanted to. But again, I'm talking about more of the game that was actually a game, and the fact that Ottavino in a close game shows, again, he can't get out of it. Again, yesterday was a very nice, rare occasion, just like Jake Diekman in game one. But again, just Ottavino, I've just had enough. And then hopefully Stern is, again, adding these relievers to send him back to SNY to give his analysis and actually pitching for the New York Mets.
Yeah, I've come to the point where if Adam Ottavino is on this team after the trade deadline, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. Hopefully, at some point they move on from that. You mentioned Nimmo, but I'm also going to mention Harrison Bader. Because, I mean, he has been a little bit careless on the base paths, let's just say that, and then he ended up hurting himself because of that. So, not great, let's just say that. But Harrison Bader, I love you. I love your passion. I love your energy. And you're continuing to make our third co-host look like an idiot. So, continue to do that, please. He's been great. Hopefully, we can have him back on the field because we do need a player like him to beat a team like the Braves. Now, any other thoughts for the trade deadline in general, specifics, anything else you want to add here? Because again, it's a big event. So what do you got in that brain of yours?
I mean, again, barring winning the next 6 games, I don't expect any of our guys in our big list. I'll be shocked again if they go out and dominate the Braves and win all 4 games by like a run differential of like plus 27. Sure, I think that can definitely change the outlook of what Stearns is doing. But I think he knows this is a year. I think the expectations have changed. Of this isn't just a wait and see year. Now it's a competitive year. But again, he kind of knows that this isn't the year to push every single chip. And like I said earlier, there isn't a guy to push every single chip on the table for. So continue to add on the margins. If you could be opportunistic and go to a team that is brain dead stupid, maybe it's the Miami Marlins, maybe Tampa Bay. But again, you always have to fear trading with Tampa Bay. Like if you can get that, take on a lot of that money, like they did with who's the guy they traded already? Not Eflin. Savali. Like they moved Savali's money for nothing. Maybe
Eflin's another piece you can consider as well.
Eflin is a guy that could make a lot of sense. Is making some money next year. We're getting official reports that Randy is available. So and is under team control through 2026. The Pirates have been linked to it, just like the Pirates were linked to a guy like Taylor Ward. So again, it just depends how aggressive he wants to be. And again, in this market, it's not a great one. Like there's a lot of, we say mid players, but a lot of glue guys, a lot of guys that are just ball players compared to the superstars. You don't have that. I don't think Garrett Crochet is a superstar. I think Garrett Crochet is a very good pitcher, but I think Garrett Crochet is a very flawed pitcher that we've only seen him pitch 104 innings in his big league career. He has 2 shoulder surgeries, and this year is not going to be a starter come playoff time. He's going to be a reliever. So you have to take that into consideration. I don't think Screwball gets traded unless Baltimore puts Jackson Holliday on the table. Or they put Mayo, Basello, Kerstad, and Norby on the table. Like I don't think Screwball's getting it. So again, you're looking at kind of these with the Red Sox being, good, Tyler O'Neill, who would have been a very interesting trade target for the Mets, he's not going to be available. And again, just
Yeah.
the conglomerate of teams still thinking they can be in it because of the wild card race. Yes, the Mets have made a little bit of room between them, but there's still, again, the Pittsburgh Pirates are still in, San Diego, the Cardinals, the Braves. You still have about 5 teams in the National League battling for 3 spots. And as good as again, like we kind of hinted at, as good as the Phillies are, they're only 10.5 up on us. Like, I'm not saying we're going to chase down Philadelphia. I think we only have don't we go to Philly twice the rest of the year? I know we play them one series at home, albeit 2
You got
of
some
the 4
games in
games.
hand on it, so.
And we do have some games in hand. I know we do play them 4 games in September. I will be at 2 of them. In the last homestand of the year, I'll be at 2 of them. But I think I think we play them in Philadelphia in August? I didn't check that. But again, you can make some ground up there. So again, my thing, just don't overpay. And I think this is going to be a overpay market because there's not a lot of teams selling. A guy like Mark Cannon will probably go for more than what we expect. We even saw it with Hunter Harvey. Hunter Harvey got traded. Yes, I know Pipeline isn't the be-all, end-all. And Caden Wallace isn't a great overall prospect, but to a basic casual fan, Hunter Harvey was traded for the number 2 prospect in the Royals system. Yes, the Royals system isn't good, but again, to a casual fan that isn't obsessed, that's kind of a crazy price to pay for a reliever. So, and you have so many teams looking for the same thing. It's a seller's market. And again, do I love that the Mets are good? Yes. Is there a part of me that wishes that, we weren't doing that and the fact that maybe we could have cashed out for the future? There's a part of me in the back of my head kind of wishing that, but you know what? They've overachieved. They've shut me up. They've shut a lot of people up that thought they were going to be dog shit, and they've earned that right to be a buyer. And yeah, well, the Pete Alonso elephant is going to be looming, and potentially just losing him for a draft pick is not what I would have wanted. Kind of the same thing with Luis Severino, but again, if he continues to pitch well and again pitches us in the postseason, he really can't complain. Again, you take your draft pick because again, he got you to the playoffs. So again, I wish we were kind of selling because especially how this market looks to be shaping up, we could have done even better in my opinion than what we did last year with so-called
You
bigger
want to
hype.
lose?
What?
You're a fake fan.
I'm a fake fan. But again, and if Stearns got his way, and Stearns planned it this way of a bunch of one-year deals, that especially how this market is, the Mets really could have recouped a lot. I mean, obviously, we don't know that they play well, which also would have dampened that. But especially there's not a lot of sellers. It's going to be a seller's market. It would have been a very interesting to see Stearns have the ability to completely retool. But we're not talking selling, we're talking buying, and the Mets are in a playoff spot. So I got to, again, GM hat off, they blew Pal the outlier. You got to keep pushing forward and worry about Atlanta now.
Yeah, of course. And this is a big series, of course. As we've said, they're 2 games behind Atlanta. So they could make a difference in this series and beat up Atlanta, who is in a very vulnerable place. As we've said, it is just really not their year, to be honest. And listen, we also have some other comments coming in here. Easy asking about like Drew Smiley, something like that. Andrew Chafin. Both of them are lefties, correct? Yes, correct. Yeah. Both of them are lefties. I mean, I'm done with the soft tossers personally. Like that's just not my precedent. Like I've seen enough of Quintana. I've seen enough of Jake Diekman, who's lost a lot of velocity recently, even though he was adrenalined up against Aaron Judge. I've seen enough of the Joey Lucchesi. I'm done with it. Like I'm good with a lefty, but it needs to be a lefty with actual somewhat of explosiveness. Guys like Sean Manaea who can get you strikeouts. But the crafty lefty, it's just, especially with the walk problems that we have had, I'm really done with that. Andrew Chafin, I think it's time to give up on that. Like we've been connected to him for so goddamn long. I mean, it just enough already. Like I think that at this point, and of course Chris Bassett can come into play. I think that there's a little bit of PTSD from that playoff game, of course, that Mets fans are kind of backing up from it. But he's also another guy that can give you some length, like that. Guys, you can ask if we have an opinion on any guys in the chat. I see a lot of people doing that so far. AJ Puck, I had him on my buy low list. That would be a good one. Good lefty, explosiveness. I'm not saying that he would take away the consistency that you could get from Brooks Raley, who was, a huge loss to this bullpen. Let's not forget that. But, if you want to go the lefty direction, I know that, David Stearns likes his little funky lefties as well. Your little different look from the bullpen. AJ Puck is one that you could buy low on. Definitely. We talked about Tanner Scott as well, who we're kind of off on. Like, I'm not really going after it. It would be a rental. And
in
I
division.
don't know. I feel like it needs to be a team that needs a closer. It just needs to be a team that needs a closer. The Mets have their closer. Whether you like him or not, whether you want him dead or not, they have their closer. So I feel like that would just be like, just the overkill of just unnecessary, plus the division tax as well that goes into there of a player that's playing so well. There's a strong possibility you got to give up 2 top 10 guys for Tanner Scott with that division tax, and also with his value so skyrocketed up where Tanner Scott probably is going to win reliever of the year, right? I mean, is there anybody else that could?
Class A.
Class A, well, that's the other league.
American League. I mean, National League.
Exactly. National League, it probably is Tanner Scott.
Helsley.
Compared to Tanner Scott, though, but he has been dominant. I mean, let's be real for a second. He hasn't had many opportunities because the Marlins are horrendous, but as you look at it, the Mets going into this bullpen, the Mets going into this trade deadline, there's areas that we know that we're well aware of, but they're small areas. So that is good that the Mets are in this position on this upswing here. And hopefully they can have a really good series against the Braves and put themselves in an even better position than they were, which was like a month ago, where they were just completely lost, month and a half ago. I mean, it was looking real bad. But aside from Andrew laughing, parting words going into this Braves series, from what you've seen, what you like, what you dislike, 5 days away from the trade deadline. What do you think, Andrew? Parting words? What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, this is a series, again, it's the biggest series of the year because it's not just the fact of, hey, if you win it, you can jump in this first wild card, potentially. The Braves have the sword on their throat. If you let them win this series, I am terrified that this is the turning point where they can go nuts. They'll have another 2022 deadline where they add a bunch of quality bets and they go on the run. You have them dead. You sweep them, you win 3 out of 4, and you kind of say enough of this shit. Like, yeah, you've had our hand the last couple of years. We put the bullet in the Yankees. Now we have to deal with the Braves.
Yeah.
Yes, Sale's pitching tonight. Are we getting Lopez? Is he in line? I know Morton's going tomorrow against Senga. Is Ronaldo pitching for the Braves this series?
We might get him. I'm not sure.
I know
I might have to
Schuster, I
look
think
that up.
Stauber, I think, is pitching Sunday, right? They're young. They got the kid pitching Sunday. Yeah,
We are getting Lopez in the series finale
he's
on
on
Sunday
Sunday,
against
okay,
David
so.
Peterson. Yeah.
So again, you got the Braves at a vulnerable point. Don't give they're down. They just lost Max Fried. They just lost Ozzy Albies. Their momentum and their vibes are down. Put the bullet in their head. Like you have again, yes, it's end of July. They still have 2 full months. They could pull some Brave magic bullshit. No one would be shocked. But right now, they are the lowest they're going to be. They're like us in May. Don't give them any kind of adrenaline. Don't give them any kind of momentum. Keep pushing them down the mountain and put the goddamn dagger in their heart.
I mean, and again, listen, that's a young Braves team because we know eventually they're going to be back. They're going to be back. So you might as well take advantage of it right now. When the pot is hot, when it's steaming, and we're going into this series with the upswing as of right now, coming off a fun Subway series, and you just got to keep pushing. The job is not finished whatsoever. We're in a better spot than we were a month and a half ago, but they got to keep winning. They got to keep playing better baseball than the day before. Just keep going, and you've got to play 162 games, and anything that you can basically say usually. Let's hope that the starting pitching holds up with Tyler McGill back into the rotation, which winging a prayer. Let's just say that. It's going to be fun to see Senga back. I can't wait. I cannot wait to have him back as well. We gotta keep pushing here. That's it. But other than that, guys, we will see you guys next time. Thank you to those of you who are watching, listening, for those of you who stayed for the entire stream live, for those of you watching on replay, for those of you who came in for a little bit and talked to us. Thank you so much. But main thing, make sure to subscribe to the Mets Weekly channel because we have a lot of fun stuff coming up in this next week. First thing, tomorrow, most likely, if not, it will be on Saturday, but I am expecting that it will be tomorrow. My full-on review of the 20 selections that the Mets made in the MLB draft. They have signed 18 of them, so most of these guys are going to be in their farm system. So for those of you who are wondering where that video is, I kind of got a little bit pushback on it. Wasn't feeling that well, so the slow production was there. But tomorrow it should be out. Middle of the day, most likely 4 or 5 o'clock before the game starts. So make sure to go check that out. I know you guys really enjoyed that video last year when I did it. So I did it a little bit more specifically, a little bigger and better. So hopefully you guys enjoy that as well. And then also for our trade deadline, we got some big stuff planned for that. We are going to be live as we usually are. I think this is like the 4th straight year that we're going to be doing this for the trade deadline. So get ready for that. And turn on those post notifications because we've got some fun stuff coming up. And the Mets are pretty fun as well. We've got quite a fun stretch ahead of us. It's going to be nerve-wracking. It's going to be exciting. Going to be a little bit of both. So other than that, we will see you guys next time. Follow everybody individually. Follow us on TikTok and on X. You guys know the drill. All the links are in the description. Let's go Mets, and we'll see you guys next time.